And we're live. All right, let's kick this off proper. Let's do the first things first. Got to introduce everybody. So we'll start with, on my screen, we'll start with the far left. So Daniel, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Daniel. I'm the CEO of Constantine Media, and we focus on managing esports pros and streamers. That's it.
All right. David, would you please introduce yourself?
Dave Posey. I'm a PayPal.
Do you want to give
help?
One more try, just one more.
Right. So push and train and mentor for people on better, cheaper, faster, better, more.
This is so not how I wanted this to go. Okay. So basically, David is my dad, and he works at PayPal, and he is a do you want to give your title and see if that comes through, Dad?
Director of Customer in the Platform Group.
Okay. We're just going to have to go with it. Okay. Gabe, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Gabe Krajicek. I'm the CEO at Kasasa. And we help community banks and credit unions compete with the big guys. So it's, if you look back at the 1990s, mid-1990s, community banks and credit unions had about 80% market share, and that's fallen to 28% today. And it's all been gobbled up by the top, 3 or 4 biggest banks in the country, really. And when you think about like what power means, it's not like probably the truest form of power is financial power. So to have that be in the hands of 3 or 4 people, as opposed to, thousands and thousands of people that live in the community and love that community and care about their consumers, to me, that's kind of a bad thing. So what we're trying to do at Kasasa is repel that wave.
Excellent. Okay. And my name is Eric Posey. I am a sometimes project manager for Constantine Media. I work alongside Daniel. And on the other side, I work as an account executive at Insight, where I'm basically an IT consultant. Now, to start the podcast off, essentially what we're going to start by talking about is tips and sort of advice for college graduates and high school graduates who are kind of making their first foray into the job market. It's something that when I was growing up and when I was starting, kind of getting my own job, I worked for my parents for about 8 years. My dad can attest to this. It was very difficult for me to start learning how to interview and how to actually get out and get into a job. So it's something I think that all of us, me being somebody that's worked for and interviewed for a lot of different jobs, and Daniel and my dad and Gabriel, Daniel on the other side of hiring people and introducing people to a company, and same with Gabriel and my dad. But if you were to say, and we'll start this off and just kind of go down the line again, but basically, if you were to say the most important thing when applying for and actually going in for an interview into a job, those kind of 2 starter points, what is the most important thing that you as an applicant should bring to the table? So Daniel, if you want to start that one off.
I feel like I have the least amount of experience in kind of approaching this, but for me, the biggest piece was understanding the company. You have to understand what you're getting yourself into to figure out, and this is kind of messed up a little bit, but some interviews are going to be your practice interviews. They're going to be with companies that you don't necessarily want to work for, or they're lower on your priority list. And so some you're going to go into just to make sure to brush off those cobwebs, but you still should know what the company's about. And if you do get the job and it's the only offer you get, why would you want to work there? So you should still apply for a collection of companies that you genuinely do want to work for, but there are going to be some that are higher on your priority list than others. So for me, in the gaming industry, it'd be different if I was to get a job offer at Blizzard versus at Gearbox Games, which is a much smaller studio. I'd still want to work in that industry, but a job at Blizzard is basically a golden ticket to being in the games industry and making those connections. Knowing what the company's about, its values, its mission, everything else, you should also make sure to be as accurate as you can be on your resume and have examples of how you relate to that job title and to that company itself. How do you actually embody those values that they have?
Fair. Dad, do you want to take the reins and add to it?
I'll give it a spin. I can tell you the first thing I look for is attitude. And that takes in a lot of ground. But a candidate that comes in confident and eager and who seems to understand themselves well and has an idea of where they think they want to go, no matter what that is, to me is attractive. That tells me they've put some thought and preparation into it, and that they've started to grasp where they are in the world and where they want to get to and what's between here and there. So I think that's a good point Daniel raised about knowing the company, choosing your interviews, choosing your spots, all that totally makes sense. But I really key in on a candidate's attitude.
Okay. Gabe.
I agree with everything they've said. And I would add to the thing that I look for, like there's table stakes stuff, the stuff that if you don't have, there's no way you're getting in the door. You got to have a good resume, no typos, all the things, we hear that. And you got to be able to explain that you have the competency to do the job. You got the experience to do the job. But I think that for me, and it's not really a for me thing, I think this is for humans. I think that the best way to get a job is to be able to tell your story in a compelling way. And I think that storytelling is incredibly undervalued in what we're taught in school as it in comparison to what it actually takes to succeed. To be able to tell a story well is at the heart of being a great salesperson. And that doesn't matter if you're selling a product or you're selling yourself. Humans are hardwired to be able to respond to this idea that there's a status quo, there's an event that occurs, there's some sort of conflict, there's some sort of climax, there's some sort of resolution, and there's a new status quo. And I think that every person has to be able to tell their story that way, that shows that their story arc brings them to this moment. And I know that that sounds like a really weird thing to think, but like, I notice a lot of gaming posters behind you. The biggest improvement in games that I've seen in my life, and I started on Atari, is that story arcs became a part of it. And then you just connect so much more sincerely to the idea of a character doing something for a reason and overcoming it. And I've hired people because they were able to tell me that their story was one of a lot of conflict, that they overcame a lot of obstacles, and they told it in a really compelling way. And I hired them not just because their story was good, because their storytelling was good. And we just had a conference here in Austin this week with 550 of our clients in the Hilton. And one of the things that I got complimented by a lot of the community financial institutions that we serve, they said, man, your entire executive team is such good communicators. It's like we actually train on telling stories, because that's how human brains are hardwired to accept information. So if it's like a Lego piece and the brain is one Lego and your story is another, like configure your story to hook onto the way the brain wants to receive the data. And it has that same kind of story arc that we see in all fiction and in anything that most humans remember, in their lives.
Right. That's very true. So you would kind of say that's similar to Simon Sinek's point when he was talking about start with why.
Oh yeah. That's one of my very favorite TED Talks ever. I'm obsessed with that. I've told so many people to watch it.
It is incredible. It is absolutely incredible when he explains the difference between Apple selling what they do instead of why they do it. And you can immediately tell which one Apple does and why it's so successful, because it just connects instantaneously.
Absolutely. I was completely disconcerted after I watched that for like 9 years because I couldn't explain why my company needed to exist. And I was just like, I can't answer the question. Simon posed the question. I can't answer it. Our mission was to help community banks and credit unions beat the big guys. But I was like, does it really matter? Seriously? I mean, if all the small banks go out of business, don't the big guys just take their place? Or, fintech competitors come on the scene and the gap gets filled. That's capitalism. So it's going to work. Yeah. And so I was trying to challenge myself with that thinking. And what I finally resolved, and it really did take like better part of a year, was what I said earlier, was this idea that financial power is real power. And that power being accumulated in the hands of a few CEOs of mega banks who have been quite quantifiably, provably bad at how they manage our nation's money. I mean, the Great Recession is directly their fault. And I have a white paper I'll be glad to send you if you don't.
Actually, I would actually like to see. I'm serious.
We can get it to you. It's how much credit default swap risk was on the balance sheet of mega banks versus community financial institutions. And I can't remember the payday on that, but it's like 10,000 to 1 at least, or 1,000,000 to 1. It's some ridiculous number. They were so over leveraged, it was insane. And they should have been left to fail, in my opinion, but that's a whole separate deal.
That's a whole nother podcast.
That's a whole nother
podcast. Absolutely. So kind of going back to
I jump in there for a second?
Yeah,
just follow up because I thought Gabe's answer was fantastic. Storytelling is killer. And one of my favorite questions when I'm interviewing candidates is some variety or variation on a theme of tell me a story about something fantastic that happened. Tell me a story about how your team did. Tell me a story about something you did you were hugely passionate about. Because how a person tells their story reveals so much about the way they think and how they see themselves in the world.
Amen.
How do you see your relationship with your team? How do you see going out as an adventurer, or are you a victim? You know, did things happen to you, or did you just, there's worlds of exploration in that question. Good answer.
Seriously.
Thanks. That's an awesome point.
Awesome. So kind of let's or did you have something to say, Daniel, or no?
Not really. I think we have an interesting, I think we answer the question from probably a college graduate's perspective, but I think a lot of people coming out of high school, they don't face an interview or expect from their interviewee to really have this quality approach to the interview. So like if they're applying for a gas station job or a lifeguarding job, it's really not going to be as extensive as kind of what we're talking about here. But I think they do face a problem of how they represent themselves when they're applying for college. That's also another version of an application where they don't necessarily be in front of someone in a lot of situations, but it's more in essays. And I mean, I think there's a lot of advice that could be given both from David and Gabe in regards to, you know, being able to communicate on paper as well as being able to do it in person. And so I think that might be just interesting to jump into and get y'all's opinions on that, because a lot of people are really pretty horrible at writing and really bad at communicating on paper and getting not necessarily their voice, but at least the right tone for what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if y'all have any advice on that, I think that'd be kind of cool to hear.
Yeah. Gabriel, David, anyone want to lead it off?
I've got two things that I feel really passionately about how people communicate. One is I just absolutely cannot stand it when someone tries to pretend like they're smarter than they are or uses big words. I got in college, one of my English professors said, Mr. Krajicek thinks he's going to get an A because he can use a thesaurus. And I remember that one cutting me like a knife, and I was like, never again. I got his point. Like, smart is smart, good is good. You don't have to use big words to prove it. And if you are using big words excessively or unnecessarily flowery language, I don't know. Like, to me, it always makes me just be real suspicious that person is actually smart. And you know this for yourselves. Think back to high school. You guys are real smart. I can tell you're some smart guys. So think to the smart guys in high school and then the people that made straight A's because they studied their effing ass off. And that's a different kind of thing. And when I'm building a company, I generally prefer the really smart people, the people that didn't have to look like they were really smart. That doesn't mean they didn't make straight A's. Some of my best friends were all, valedictorians, salutatorians. They were brilliant people and they made great grades, but it wasn't ever about showing you that. Like, they were just naturally that way, and it kind of just came off with a natural ease. And I think that a lot of times when people come into interviews, they're just so polished and they want to be like saying everything so right. And I really just need them to relax. Just if you are that awesome, just please show me it, because I want to see it. Like, it's not a desire for me or any other hiring manager. We want to see somebody awesome, but we can't see it when somebody's so you know, worked up and trying to show you their smarty pantsness. It's just silly. Like, I mean, nobody talks that way. Nobody talks that way. Like, and like our board of directors doesn't talk that way. We have a $6 billion private equity fund, and my chairman has sold $3 billion companies. So that's not how really super smart people talk. They're not overly tense about it. It's just chill. And I think that if people want to kind of be recognized for their intellect and their capability, backing it off a notch would be a really good thing. The other thing is, despite the ramblingness of my last point,
no, the more information is better. So honestly, like just let it go, man.
The other thing is, if an email takes more than a minute to read, one of the things I ask of all of the employees at Kasasa is to use something called newspaper headlines. And Dr. Rados was my marketing professor at Vanderbilt, and he was an awesome guy, and he preached all the time about newspaper headlines. And his point was, like, a newspaper headline is never traffic accidents this week. It's instead 10 killed on Mopac yesterday and 10-car pileup. Like, it's very specific. It tells you the whole story in the newspaper headline. It's not the category. It's not revenue section. It's revenue up $2 million. It's always, you know, like a summary of what you're trying to say, like a thesis sentence in a paragraph. And so one thing that I request of any email that's longer than a minute is to break every paragraph into a newspaper headline and put it in bold italic at the top. And it seems like this really silly idea, but I've been amazed at how it sharpens people's thinking, because if they can do it that way, then they actually have an outline for what they're trying to say. A lot of times people say, "Oh, I can't do a newspaper headline for the way that I type." Well, that's because the way that you type doesn't make sense. Because if you can't put a thesis sentence on top of every paragraph, something's wrong with the words, not with my request. So being able to break down what you're saying into a structured way of thought and putting like a really simple to read kind of like, you know, we should do this project because it will save $2 million next year. The project will cost us $1 million to implement. But you can, underneath each one of those, you have the 4 or 5 substantiating points that explain the point. But whenever you're a time-pressed executive, you got to run through all this stuff. And so if I had someone following up with me that sent me a newspaper headline email after I tried to hire them, I would be so grateful that they would save me that time and help me focus what I'm supposed to understand from their message, that I would be like, I want to work with this person.
Just to jump off of that real quick, if for anyone that's listening that is in high school, what he just said is basically have your topic sentences. So whatever you're answering, whatever the question is, it's a topic sentence. Give your entire, just have one sentence that describes the rest of the paragraph, and then give that evidence, be it your own personality, be it, you know, personal anecdotes, actual, you know, papers where you have evidence of X, Y, and Z. Like that all is perfectly translated into applying for college, but then also specifically working at a $6 billion company. So
there you go. So actually, Dad, did you want to say something? Right.
Well put.
Or do you mind if I?
Hell is a great answer again. I'm totally stealing that. I'm telling you what. Thanks, Gabe. And seriously, no, that's an awesome way to look at it. You get the point across right at the front of it. So I guess what I would add to that is a school student or a college student or a more senior person, when you go into an interview and somebody kicks a question at you, there's an instinct to want to fill the silence and to start talking right away. And I see a lot of candidates at every level just dive into an answer and hope they're going to find an answer in the word salad that comes out of their mouth. And Gabe just put his finger on it, that what you could do instead, and what I look for, is somebody to take 2 or 3 or 5 long seconds, it seems like an eternity, getting it out. And my plan B, personally, over the years, I've learned that I can put together about a 10 or 15 second chatter in my head that can very little, but fills the space and gives me about 5 seconds. So if you ever hear me that way, you know what's going on. I really don't have a good answer. I'm still hunting for something worth spitting out. So take your time. Answer the real question with a headline first, that grabs the customer's attention, whether it's a hiring manager or a real customer or a sales target or whatever, and then fill in the story behind it. Why does this make sense? How does it work for me? How does it work for you? How can it work for our company doing business with you? But I love this idea of starting with the headline, Gabe. I'm totally stealing it. Oh.
Awesome.
There you go. So, Gabe, if I could kind of maybe break down what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
So, from what I understand, it was people who are writing these papers and trying to have these flowery and polished answers should really focus on making sure that their personality and the reality of who they are kind of shines through. That be right?
Well, at least for me, I mean, I don't know if that works in other companies. I've only ever worked at companies that I was the boss of, so I don't really know if it works in other companies. I don't mean that. I really don't mean that as arrogantly as it sounds. Like I don't have experience to know objectively what should work in normal business. But to me, it seems pretty intuitive that like just being who you are seems like that's going to work a lot better because, I mean, I've met a lot of smart people and they can tell when people are just kind of full of it. And it's not just about the way that you write. It's about the way you carry yourself. Like, I mean, I don't know how to say it. Like, it's sad sometimes. And this sounds mean. And I don't mean it mean because it actually makes me sad. I see a candidate in our office and, you know, it's a lady or a man. If it's a man, he's in his best suit. And he's dressed up. And you can tell, like, he's nervous and he's ready. And I can just tell, like, you just need to chill out. Just seriously chill out. You're gonna screw this up because you're too tense. And I know it'd be very stressful to go to that event, but like you're hiring for a position, at least we are. I mean, part of the interview process is this is going to be a stressful job. How do you perform under stress? And we want to see somebody who we want to hang out with, who's going to be part of a great culture. That's going to be fun to be somebody on the team in the trenches taking grenades when it all sucks. And if it looks like you're going to be somebody who's, you know, just uncomfortable in those types of situations, it's unlikely that you'll get to join the team. And I just think like it's ironic that people that have the ability to be so awesome shoot themselves in the foot because they're afraid they're not awesome. And what they really need to know is that they are before they started.
Damn, that's pretty profound.
I totally agree. Especially on even the client recruitment side, for me, I don't really want to work with anyone that I feel like it would be uncomfortable to hang out with because that person really just wouldn't fit me, fit the team, wouldn't fit what we're about. I mean, and it stinks that sometimes you do come across that kind of failure of the elevator test, so to speak, where, you know, you can tell someone's not being genuine. And even if you can see that they're smart and everything else, if you're not able to be genuine in that sort of stressful situation, then you're probably going to misrepresent yourself and the company at some point in time. So it's like, what's the point at that junction?
So I'd like to take a second here and kind of ask another. Sorry?
Those two, before Daniel's point, there was two around there. Both the writing and the interviewing thing are learnable skills where you can improve yourself over time by practicing. You need this interviews. You need to talk to people who will poke you with some hard questions and examine you and put you under pressure so you get used to that before you're in an interview that matters. Okay, to get used to the essays or whatever. There's great editing applications online too. There's a free app that you can just drop a text blob into it and it'll analyze it for you. I think Textio is the same kind of thing for job descriptions and job-related language. So for cheap or free, you should be able to get some impersonal feedback. But for Christ's sake, find your friends and your acquaintances and people and do some practice. Give yourself a chance to get better.
Amen. And
Today is the stupidest I'm ever going to be.
Hello. Although sometimes I felt smarter in college.
Go for it.
But there is a point I want to pile on that, just to be like, so you know how bad you can suck at something and how much better you can get. I want to if you'll let me indulge myself with a little bit of storytelling, I'd like to go back all the way to college, or because this story culminates in exactly what your dad just talked about, and I want to let people know how bad they can be and still turn out okay. I was in college with a zoology degree from LSU, and I was really good at science. I had taken a ton of personality tests, like those Myers-Briggsy kind of things. All kinds of other ones, like there were job placement, Berkman, and I always wanted to be a surgeon. And every time I took the test, they'd say, "Yeah, you'd be a great surgeon." So that's what I'm going to do. So I went to LSU. I was top of my class. I got into Emory Medical School, and my stepmom, who is one of the most awesome people in the world, said, "Gabe, before you go to medical school, why don't you take the test called the Johnson O'Connor?" And the Johnson O'Connor is given in, I think, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. But if you guys ever wonder about your careers or have kids that might, it's a moral duty to everybody go take the Johnson O'Connor. Because what they do differently than every other test is, instead of looking what your personality thinks it'd like to do, which, by the way, mine's a perfect surgeon. I should be a surgeon. I'm super introverted. I'm a control freak. I mean, I've got a lot of character flaws that make me perfect for surgery. But the extroverted nature of a CEO is just not what I'm built for. I'd much prefer that we're doing this on a podcast. I'm in my media room than that we were in a real human contact. That's not what I'm good at. And so what Johnson O'Connor does differently is they don't look at what your personality wants to do. They look at what do you have to be good at to do that job. So, for example, if you can't do spatial orientation skills, you're not going to be a very good architect, period. I don't care how much you want it. My brother has perfect pitch. He didn't know that until he went to the Johnson O'Connor, but he has perfect pitch. Like if you say sing an A above middle C, he sings the A and play the piano and it matches. And because of that, he went on to Berklee School of Music, and he now makes a living as a musician. So the thing that was so cool about this was it gave me a direction on what I could be, but it also really derailed my plans because my hand-eye coordination is in the lower 15th percentile. So I only wanted to be a surgeon. That was it. Surgery was the only thing that even intrigued me about being a doctor. And it's not because I don't think other doctors are great. It's just I don't know, the idea of being a car mechanic with higher stakes just seems so cool. But anyway, I didn't go to medical school. I eked out a business minor, and my dad died, and I moved up to Nashville, Tennessee to get a job at this investment bank that was raising money for very early stage technology companies right at the height of the dot-com explosion. And then the dot-com implosion occurred, and my boss said, I could lay you off, or you can go run this little company, Dealer Skins. And Dealer Skins was the first company that I ever led. And I was 22. I had a zoology degree. I had no business experience. I had no car business experience. I didn't know anything about anything that I was doing. And you go back to that point and try to think about how you got to where you are. And what I realize is that it all hinged on one moment where I could have gone left or I could have gone right. And that moment was the very first interview that I ever had to try to raise money. Now, keep in mind, I'm an introvert. I'm scared. I did not have a date in college. Not one. I had a girl that I dated from high school into college who broke up with me 4 times during college. At no point did I actually go on my own date. I'm a shy guy. I have no interaction with anybody. And
she came back 3 times, by the way.
Well, I begged. Shamelessly. And so anyway, I've been working really hard. I've had the job for about a month now. Just took over. I'm a kid, and I know how to write a business plan because my dad taught me that literally before he died a year ago. One of the things he said, I'm going to teach you how to write a business plan for a company, because he wanted me to be an entrepreneur. And so I was pretty proud that I know how to do it. And he kind of worked me through what he thought was good practices, including some newspaper headlines. And I put that into this plan that was 40 pages long. It was the best business document that I've ever written. And I went into this venture capital guy that our chairman had set up an interview with. Now, keep in mind, the dot-com implosion had just occurred. So I was already thinking my odds are very low. But I went in and I had this plan. I thought it looked awesome. Had like color on every page unnecessarily. And I done it at Kinko's with a good spiral bound, not the comb bound, because that's ghetto. And so I gave the nice spiral bound deck over to the guy in the venture capital suit. And he said, tell me about your business. And I couldn't think of a single word to say, like not one word. I couldn't make a noise come out of my throat. It was like Darth Vader was like, you know, Star Wars episode 4, and he goes on the Death Star and he chokes that guy with his hands. I was that guy, and I was clicking my neck as I was trying to make words come out, because it was just that dry little crackle as that choking noise hits the gasping sound of a lung trying to spew up a word. And luckily, our chairman was there, John Gerber, and he took over. That guy didn't invest. That's not the point. The point is I made another 40 presentations that year, literally 40 in 1 year. So do the math on how often I was doing presentations to investors. And at the very end of it, we had, I went down to the ATM. This was like September 11th had just occurred. Towers had fell. The economy's worse than ever. And I go to check our balance at the ATM because I didn't have online banking. And I took the ATM card down, and it was $1.34. And this is about a year after that other story that I told you. Still, nobody's invested 40 presentations later. We have $1.34. And at this time, I've already factored the receivables, which I don't know if y'all know what that is. I'll be glad to explain it, but it's the crack cocaine of financing. I personally guaranteed a bunch of bank debt that I didn't know how I'd pay for. And I've got $1.34 in the bank, and that was bad. But the bad thing was that I was the bookkeeper for the company, and I knew that the balance on the bookkeeping ledger said negative $20,000. So that meant that there were hot checks about to explode all over the place. And at the time, we didn't have our own office space. We had given 5% of our equity to another company to give us use of their office space, because they had grown a lot during the dot-com, Pike, laid off a bunch of people. So we took their computers and took their phones and everything. And so we were staying there rent free, their telephones, their computers, their hosting for our websites, their IT guy. And we've got $1.34 in the bank. We've got negative 20,000. And their COO asked me to go to the back, and his name was Randy. And Randy said, I've got some bad news. You got to get out of here in 2 weeks because we're out of business. And so I called up our chairman, the same guy that saw me choke a year ago, and said, I'm sorry, basically just apologized because I felt ashamed that I couldn't make a business out of this. And he gave me one of the best ass chewings I've ever had. He told me, don't be such a quitter and all this, like, you give up so easy. And I'm thinking about this, like, I'm giving up so easy. I told you the story with some drama. I wanted you to feel it with me. Like, it sucked. This was not giving up easy. I had been bloodied in the corner for a year as a little 22-year-old kid, not knowing what the hell I'm doing. And he's giving me that, like, Rocky Balboa speech that I needed. Just, why are you being such a wimp? Stand the hell back up. And after all, we have a meeting next week with Crom Carmichael. And you probably don't know the name Crom Carmichael, but Crom Carmichael's he's from a pretty wealthy family in Vanderbilt. There's the Carmichael Towers on Vanderbilt campus. And Crom is an awesome guy, and he saw our idea and he loved it, and he brought it to his partner, and they gave us a $500,000 loan, and it all worked out. And so, I guess the point of that is you could go one way or the other. You could say, it's all over and I can't do this, or you could say, I can do it and I'm just going to keep, swinging for the fences. And I know, for my story, there's 1,000 that didn't turn out as nicely. So I don't want to be disrespectful to those that did everything with the same effort and, high class that I tried to do it. But I also know that if you don't believe you can do it, you're not gonna.
Yeah.
Right.
Fair.
Wow. Well,
I don't think you could have closed that deal without doing the 40 attempts to learn how to do it, so that you weren't standing there crack on your throat the 42nd time.
That's it. I mean, like, if you want to try to get yourself where you want to go, you've got to be willing to take the steps on the journey. Like, you can't expect to be good. And I was watching a speech this week. We had this big event for our company. Every year we do this thing called Kasasa Nation. So we bring in all of our clients. We had 550 clients in, and one of the the in speakers was talking about the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. And I don't know that there's a simpler way to describe it. Like if you believe you can do things and that you don't blame yourself for sucking at something when you first start, because everybody does.
Yeah.
I mean,
expect it.
Yeah. Just expect that as part of the journey. And then life can be really fun because it's okay to suck. And then it's really fun to learn not to suck.
Yep.
Awesome.
Get knocked down 7 times, get up 8.
That's it.
There you go.
Strangely enough, that also applies to relationships for anyone that's listening that's in one or about to be in one.
He was right.
Comment on that.
Fair enough. Okay. So the next kind of section we're going to jump into is, wow, actually Gabe kind of put the hammer down on that one. But I do want to kind of jump back into job interviews and how those kind of go down. And I want to kind of approach it from a different perspective. I know, Gabe, you said your experience has been from the owner of a company looking kind of on the downward side and trying to bring people up. But so this may not apply to you as much, but as an interviewee, so this is probably for my dad and Daniel. As an interviewee, is there anybody, do you have any techniques for finding out how engaged your interviewer is? And is there any way that you can sort of have a critical save to save an interview that's kind of falling off the rails?
David, you want to take the beginnings of this one? I feel like you'll have a great answer.
I don't know about that, but I'll give it a swing. Honestly, I thought it was kind of a weird question, Eric, when I saw it in the prep stuff, because I don't know that I've ever really thought during an interview that it was off the rails, off in the weeds, that it was a dead interview. I'm in the cage. I'm swinging. Right. I'm swinging from the opening gun till the finish, till the fat lady sings, however you want to say it. And there have been interviews that I've walked out thinking, I just killed it. I'm getting that job for sure, and I didn't get it. And there have been jobs that I walked out going, there's no chance in hell, that was a dead time, and they'd call me on the way home. So I guess I'm a bad person to ask about how it's going in the interview or what to save. But my advice is honestly just to swing when you get the chance. You're going to learn something. What goes along with that is be present. I think what maybe we were trying to get to in the question is have the presence of mind. It's almost like you have to look over your own shoulder. There's the part of you that's answering the question and dealing with the interview, but there should be part of your consciousness that's watching the whole process go down. That's looking at your body language, their body language, the kinds of questions that are being asked, how they responded to your answers, how did you respond to the next question, so that you can kind of debrief with yourself out in the parking lot and figure out, what am I going to learn from that experience? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I totally agree. Especially, not everyone really has emotional intelligence, so to speak. I know that's a term that kind of gets tossed around left and right. But it's figure out, like maybe their body language right now is telling me they're bored, or they really aren't here, or they've already made a decision, and this is just kind of them being respectful and going through the motions. I've been in interviews where, it was going sideways and it crashed and burned. And I literally it was with a larger company that's in Dallas, in Irving, actually. And I was interviewing for one of 12 spots in the company. And it was the last round of interviews, and we had a full day at the company. So I had 5 or 6 different assessments that were going to take place. One of them was a presentation, and I thought I'd prepared. I was really confident, walked in there. I crashed and burned so hard that it took me probably 2 months to recover from that beating. And then the next interview, because of how hard I crashed and burned, that momentum followed me. And so I was extremely stressed. And to Gabe's point, I was that guy that he was describing that you would not want to hire. I was stressed. I was nervous. Before this, I felt like I had it in the bag, because my first towards being able to sell in the moment under stress, I'd done so poorly that it had taken me away from my own personality. And so I was this other person that now I was just freaking out. And my interviewer wanted me to tell a story. And I started telling these stupid anecdotes about work and this and that. And it was them pulling me in and saying, tell me a personal story. Let me get to know you. So if you feel like you are at that moment where you're just eating shit, like that's where you're at, that's what's happening, change tact, switch gears, and try and give something a bit more personal that you feel extremely confident talking about because you've experienced maybe multiple times, to where it feels more natural and it might get you back in the right mindset. I mean, it's only happened to me once, so I really only have that anecdote to really go off of. But in my experience, if I were ever to be in that situation again, I would switch gears and talk about how my personal life and my personal experience relates to that question and how to kind of answer it, instead of going to different job experience. Might help be a bit more personable.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay.
You know, before we leave that one, I got to say, I feel a little weird saying this with two guys that are obviously really good sales folks and relate to people probably far better and on better levels than I do. But I think there's an aspect that we haven't talked about yet in the interview process of trying to imagine what it looks like from the other side of the table, of trying to have some empathy with the interviewer and putting that in play. So to your original question, Eric, if I was in an interview and I'm giving an answer and it looks like my interviewer is checked out or is closed body language or is lost interest, for starters, stop talking would be my first suggestion. And my second one would be ask a question like, is this answer addressing the question that you asked? I'm not sure I understood it. I'm not sure I'm in the right place. And I'm not sure I want to waste the time. Maybe waste the time is the wrong word, but I'm not sure I want to spend 2 more minutes trying to finish this answer if I'm not answering the right question. But re-engage, get back into the dialogue with the person and ask them, where are we going with this?
I think that's awesome advice. I mean, it's so true that whenever you see somebody glaze over, asking a question is just an easy, simple way to get them to engage again. And importantly for you as the speaker, to know where to redirect your comments, because you're obviously off in left field at the moment.
Right.
Something's not working.
Right. Something's not working. Ask a question and find out what it is.
It's obvious, but doesn't that sound like a good idea?
Yeah. No, it does. It does. That's good advice. Okay. And then the second question, which was again in the prep, what are some skills that you can learn and then apply to your career, maybe regardless of what industry or what job description you have? Are there things that you can carry with you that you can learn at the beginning and master over time that will serve you well regardless of where you are?
Can I answer that one?
Go for it.
I'm obsessed with my answer. Habit 5, 7 habits of highly effective people. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. The application of empathic listening is the game changer that got me to where I was able to go. I mean, like, and I'm not saying I'm the best or I've done such a, I always am sensitive to be not arrogant at all, because I know there's so many more successful people than me that are much smarter. My point is, I'm not smarter. I used empathic listening. So here's the reason it worked for me. It's just such a simple idea that what I learned, I read that book, The 7 Habits, whenever my dad was very sick. He was on the verge of dying, and I was just beginning my career. And that kind of culminated in his death. And he was a guy that was really, he was also a successful entrepreneur, and he was very culture focused. He had a lot of affection and love for his employees, and that was part of our kind of normal dinner conversation. So it was something that was baked up inside me. And fast forward to when I'm running this company at 22, and I don't know, at all what I'm trying to do. But I just read this book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I knew my dad was a culture leader, and I decided that one of my core kind of values was going to be listening to people and making them feel heard. And I am now completely convinced, if you mean it authentically, if you're not using it like a artificial Jedi mind trick so you can manipulate people, but if you do it well and you mean it authentically, It is the most powerful thing that you can do to supercharge every aspect of your life, not just your career, but your relationships with other people. I mean, the most desperate thing that people want is to be heard. It's like emotional oxygen. When people don't feel like somebody else understands them or validates them as a human being, I mean, just look at all the political conflict on both sides. It all comes down to both sides. And I'm not, I'm apolitical on this, but genuinely, there are people that need to be heard. Like, there's so many people that are just screaming, see me as a legitimate thing. And that urge is as human as humanity gets. And it shows itself in families. It shows itself in societies. It absolutely shows itself in the workplace. And, I've been frustrated, although I really appreciate all my business school training. Most of what I need to do my job, I didn't learn anything about in business school. It's all about how to make people okay, how to make a human emotions function. And to me, the core thing that I've learned that makes it work is just validate people and let them know that you hear them. Even if you don't agree, it's not about agreeing at all. Like, I frequently disagree with people that I hear. But before I disagree, I'm going to let them know that I understand the emotion and the content of what they're trying to say. And once they nod and they kind of give you that gasp of like, oh, you understand me. And then you feel that, like, it's such a release whenever someone understands you. And when you get to that point, then you have the right, then you have the kind of conversational equity to be able to say, and here's why I disagree. But if you do that before you understand, then all the person that's talking says is, you're not listening to me, and they scream louder, and the conversation descends into chaos. And welcome to America, 1918 or 2018.
There you go. Dad, do you wanna hop on
it? First off, 2 thumbs up. Great answer. Strongly agreed. Second would be, I guess the first place I was going to go is learn to face your fears. Wherever you are in your career at any age, if you're human, you got insecurities. You got areas that you feel like you should be able to do better, or that you're afraid to do, or you convinced yourself that there's some places that aren't worth going. And if there's one thing that's occurred to me more lately in life, it's that I wish I had developed this habit earlier of facing my fears directly. And my short story about that is going to tie on kind of to what one Gabe told earlier about being choked up when you're a kid. My first job as a developer, I got hired as a software programmer, and I knew that I knew less than everybody else on my team. And I was so flippin' nervous that at the weekly staff meeting, I could not unbudge. I could not spit out a word without stammering, without sweating. I shook for an hour before the meeting. I was so afraid of exposing how little I knew. And it's a learned skill to face your fears, to go in and go, you know what? I know that I don't know what I'm talking about, but the only way I'm going to learn more about this is to be open about it and to seek help. And it applies everywhere. To Daniel's point, it applies in relationships. It applies with your family. It applies when you're training your dog. It applies when you're trying to learn how to ride a mountain bike. Anything that's worth doing in your life is going to involve trying something you don't know how to do, sucking at the beginning, and learning from the experience. And the sooner you get on with it, and the more muscle memory you build into that habit of facing your fears and overcoming them, I think the happier everybody's going to be.
Yeah. There you go. Daniel, do you want to hop on?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I wasn't interrupting anyone. No, I mean, I totally agree with everything you guys have said. The only thing that I'm going to add to it is going back to one of Gabe's points, being authentic and being genuine. I think that's something that a lot of people, either they're afraid to do it, they feel like they're not good enough. I don't know. There's some reason that people put up a facade. And that's the one thing that I think a lot of people come out of school and they're trying to figure out who they are. So it's sometimes it's not even a facade. It's just that's at that point in time, they're not even sure what it is. And it's trying to figure out who you are as a person and then being authentic and true to that. And then going in to a work environment, being authentic, and then having the ability to ask questions. Not just because just questions about your environment, because you're really in a place most times when you're starting out that it's an unknown. You feel like you might know what's going on, but at the same time, you really don't. You're absolutely, and the larger the company, the harder that is to do. So my only piece of advice is be genuine, even if that is, even if you're not sure who you are, be true to the fact that you don't know who you are, and be open to as many new inputs as possible and ask questions. And that's extremely difficult for people that are extroverts, because a lot of the time we feel like we know what we're talking about, and we're used to being confident, and we're used to being the ones that are talking. And that's probably one of the biggest mistakes you can make in your 20s and early 30s, is to do all the talking when half the time you're talking out your ass. You're really trying to be as confident as possible about it, when deep down inside, just like David said, we all have those insecurities. And for a lot of extroverts, and that's all I can speak to, like I'm not an introvert by any means, armor on, and you can't really be your true self because you feel like you need to constantly be this in control person and have this confidence and this and that and all the answers, when that's actually the opposite of what you need to do.
You know what the irony is? The irony is on that point is, at least in my experience, being willing to be ridiculously vulnerable will make you the leader and engender the confidence of everybody around you. Like, I especially think it's true. And I mean, I'm the youngest Gen Xer you can be, or the oldest Gen Yer. I'm right at the cusp. So they actually, say it's not the greatest, the lucky ones. That's the title for my little weird generation, micro generation. But I think that, oh shit, I forgot where I was going with that point. It was going to be good though.
We'll be back in a second.
We'll be back in a second. I would say then, so Daniel, the focus of your point is to be genuine.
Can I remember now?
Yes, sir. Go for
it. People try to pretend to be macho and tough, like it's the definition of leadership. Like the John Wayne version of a masculine alpha male is the version of leadership. And there's still that tendency in all ages of people, regardless of the generation. But that's among the people that want to lead. Among the people that want to follow, what I've noticed is a different vibe totally. They're very extremely suspicious of any puffery. Anything that looks like you're pretending you're the badass when you're not. The Gen Y, and I would suppose it's even more true in the youngers, they see straight through that immediately. And so, like, for example, one time I remember I was in a meeting and I had not worn deodorant that day. And so I had tremendous body odor and I had really big pit stains. And I was in the meeting and I was feeling super self-conscious about it. So it's like 5 minutes in the meeting and I raised my arms real big and I was like, look, I forgot to wear deodorant. If you smell something terrible, it's me. I'm so sorry. And it just, for me, like, got it out of the room. Like, it was just like I was no longer the big elephant. It was just like, I can't help this right now. And my point is to connect it back to the primary point, being authentic, just saying, like, whatever it is, you've screwed up, you know what it is, you have terrible body odor and you have pit stains, just say it, because everybody in the room already knows it. And the more you try to pretend like you're not the stinky one, the more they look at you as a leader not worthy of being followed. But if you tell them, I know that I have bad armpits, then they'll fall back behind you and say, this is a guy I can trust.
Right.
That's not just for leaders. That's for team members as well. That's at every stage. If you're faking it and hiding it and hoping nobody will notice, everybody notices. That's a bad plan.
Yeah. It's like when I was, I'll real quick, like when I was working at State Farm as an insurance agent, when I was starting out, one of the things that my boss, Taylor, who I was hoping to have on the podcast, but he couldn't make it. One of the things he used to tell me all the time is that you're an insurance salesman. You're not an underwriter. You're not an adjuster. You're not somebody that's writing the new policy. Your job is to try and get somebody to understand the policy as best as they can. So when somebody asks you a question that is too detailed for you, all you have to say is, I know a little bit about a whole lot when it comes to insurance. I don't know everything. I'm not going to pretend to know everything. I'm connected to people that do, but my job here is to help you understand your policy and make sure that your questions get answered. If I can't answer something, I'm going to find the person that can. So, yeah. That's
also a part of making sure that your employees understand their job description too. Because if you really tell someone like, hey, you're now an insurance salesman. In their mind, they're like, okay, so I have to sell this thing, but if they have questions, I should also have all the answers. When really, you know, at the crux of it, like there's probably someone more senior that has way more experience, way more knowledge, way more everything. And I think that's a good aspect of leadership, is being able to tell people exactly, you know, what their job description is, and then give them some room to fail, because that's learning.
Yeah. Okay. So I do want to kind of jump into, so we got about 35, maybe 40 minutes left. But I do want to kind of jump into entrepreneurship, as I want this part of it to be more freeform. I don't want to have this be too structured. So Gabe, I know you opened up about your experience early on in your career and starting, I think it was called Dealer Skins.
Mm-hmm.
Starting Dealer Skins, and you kind of opened up about that. Could we kind of take it from the small end to the big end? So I know my dad started at a success, but could we kind of start with Daniel? What's been your experience starting Constantine Media? What was that like, starting a very small group of people and trying to get a company out?
I mean,
besides ongoing.
No. So just kind of to Gabe's point, like being 22, you know, that to me is impressive. Starting to run a company at 22, and being 22, and you know, this is your first gig, so to speak. It's scary. I feel like that right now, honestly. Even before this, I had a company that, you know, it didn't really get off the ground all that much. We spent a year doing things, and to a person who doesn't often experience failure, and that probably didn't register failure as a learning tool up until maybe 24 months ago, that was one of the scariest experiences of my life. And for me, the reason that in my family it's very difficult to understand failure is because we just don't do it. We've never had the option of failing, and so it just doesn't happen. And so for myself, my brother, we came from a different country. We came here not knowing English, and so for us, there really wasn't anywhere else to go. Like, you couldn't go backwards. We were already at the bottom, so really there was only forwards. And after that, it was one of those things where you made small incremental improvements, and then you built on them, and you just kept going. There was really no looking back. There was no notion of anything else. For me, in second grade, I knew I'd go to college. I didn't really know what college was because I'm the first one to graduate college in my family, but I knew that high school in the US wasn't enough. That wasn't something that I should be okay with. That's not my opinion now. I think now there are a lot of people that are extremely intelligent that could do way more than I'm doing right now without a college degree. But at that point in time, that was what I saw as my road to being able to get to where I wanted. I knew one day that I would be running a company. I knew that's what I was made for. There was no other job for me, because I'm not very good at taking direction from other people, because I tend to challenge them on their ideas, because I think their ideas can be improved upon. And the more that I was younger, the more I realized that I'm probably full of crap and I need to learn to follow. And so that was a part of my college experience, was making sure to put myself in a place where I had to follow, and that helped me later on. But being an entrepreneur, in my mind, again, 24 months ago, I thought everyone should do it. I didn't understand why other people were afraid to do it, especially in their 20s when they didn't have a family where they had room to fail. And then being in it, it's probably one of the scariest experiences ever, especially when you have a group of people following you and relying on you. It's not, you're no longer this individual. Now you have even more accountability. It's not just your investors. It's not just your clients. It's not just your employees. It's this group of individuals who look to you, and you know for a fact that you don't have all the answers. That's an extremely scary place to be in. And so now I've gotten to the point where I understand that there aren't a lot of people that should be entrepreneurs. It's not a job for everyone. I don't even know if it's going to be a job for me. I've had so much of this confidence built up that, again, way, and so I could be completely out of my environment and out of my depth, right. But I don't know any other way. And so for me, there's only forward. And even though I might have a few hiccups here and there, like Gabe was saying, you can either choose to go left or right, and right ends up being try just a little bit harder. So people that I look up to are people in the special forces where that is the mantra, just keep going, because I've seen that from my parents. I've seen that from their hard work. And so those are the things that drive me. It's not because I'm better than anyone. It's not because I went to business school. Like Gabe said, I honestly, none of the things I learned in business school are helping me right now at all, except for the fact that I made a few friends.
Accounting helps. You need that accounting 101.
Accounting 101, managerial accounting, great classes. I, again, was not the greatest with financial accounting, managerial all day long. But at the same time, I'm using rudimentary knowledge from those classes. Like, I could have asked, and that's all I would need to know. I wouldn't need to know the rest of it. And would I need it later on? Sure. Will I be doing that later on? Most likely not, because the position that I'm in isn't going to be just to do the day-to-day accounting. It's going to be, again, to lead this group of people and make sure that we have, client acquisition month to month. We have cash flow. We have all these other bits and pieces to where there's probably going to be somebody else that's going to be keeping up with the books at that point in time. But don't be afraid of failure. Failure is one of the scariest things to face because we're self-conscious, just as humans. We constantly feel in some way that we're not enough. And then when you also look at the fact that we live in cities and things like that, that naturally affects our chemical composition to where we're more stressed. Unless you're next to water, unless you're in Colorado and you're next to mountains and woods, you're more likely to be stressed out. Combine that with the fact of being an entrepreneur, combine that with the fact that there are people counting on you and everything, that's a lot more stress that's added on that could potentially break you. And it's being willing to fail that's going to be your crutch to making sure that you don't break, because failure is something that happens. If it happens, reassess, figure out if that's still the sort of company, the sort of industry, the sort of whatever you want to be in, and then push on to the next project. If the current project hasn't failed altogether and you've just failed with one division of the company or one aspect, fine. Figure it out. Reintroduce the same thing if you think it's going to be successful a second time. If not, move on to a different project. You've learned something from it. Encourage everyone on your team to try and fail on smaller things, because they will learn, and then give them small projects that they can succeed, because you want them to be used to being good at things. You want them to be used to winning, so to speak. If they're used to not failing, it gets a lot easier to not fail. If that makes any sense.
Momentum.
Yes. Thank you.
There you go. So
anyone else want to jump in? That was really long-winded.
I was gonna say, Dad, do you wanna hop in on that one, Dad?
Yeehaw! I would. Is there an echo going on? Or
There's a bit of an echo, yeah.
Okay. Thought it was just me. So let's see. I got to start at the end because that was a great answer. I appreciate that, Daniel, as a setup. But fail is a word that I'm trying to stamp out in the teams that I work with. I know there's a whole thing about failing fast and blah, 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 and fear of failure, blah, blah. I hate fail because fail has a anti-endorphin response in humans. When you failed, and especially when you're failing repeatedly, that is not a good feeling. You have to be really powerfully, intellectually in control of the situation to be able to grasp that that is a positive outcome. When you're wrapping it up in words like, I failed again, I failed again. Let me give you an alternative. I propose to my teams that we do experiments. Whenever we don't know what the hell we're doing and we have to do something, we're going to do an experiment. We're going to do enough of it to learn something. So we have a hypothesis. We put it into action. That's critical. We actually do it. We share the results. We learn from that process. And every experiment is successful. It either came out the way we expected it to and it confirmed our hypothesis, or we gathered some new data or whatever, or it disproved the hypothesis and we got smarter. And that is the overall object of the game of life. It's number 2 after happiness. Get smarter every day of your life. Get happier every day of your life. So at least that's the way I'm rolling with it. So experiment as opposed to fail is a huge key to getting at this process of building things out. The other thing I would differentiate with in your question, Eric, is you were talking about as entrepreneurs, and I think we've jumped to the conclusion that that means being a founder, especially being an owner, a CEO. And that is not the case, right? 100 times more people are going to be employed at startup companies than are going to run their own startup company. Right. So let me talk to those 100, since we have 2 founders who can be very effective about talking the founder side.
I've never been a founder, for what it's worth. Oh. I was hired early on in both companies.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking about then, right?
Hired gun CEO both times.
Nice. Right. Kudos to you. That's an awesome position to be.
Holiday over here.
I'm just saying that, and I still think I'm an entrepreneur. Like I would
for sure.
Cool that the founders are founders, but I wasn't there and I can't help that. But I jumped on as soon as I could and said, this is my kind of deal.
Yes, because entrepreneurship is in your head. It's a state of mind. It doesn't have to do with a job title or a stage. It has to do with being willing to take risks, to being willing to have unsuccessful experiments as a regular occurrence, to frequently being in a situation where you all look at each other and go, I don't know what to do. All right, well, let's throw our worst 6 ideas out and figure out which is the least bad of them, and we'll go with that next.
Yeah,
you got to pull stuff out. My startup story is not going to be the bakery. It's going to be a long time ago. My first startup company was when I was 23 years old, and I was in Colorado. Thanks, Daniel. So I was up in the mountains and the trees and the snow. It was freaking fantastic. I decided if I'm going to be poor and work for nothing, I might as well go skiing during the day. So I set it up. I was literally the only technical person, 2-person startup. I was living up in the mountains and I skied all day, came down in the afternoon and went to work programming and stayed up till 10 or 11 o'clock at night, caught a good night's sleep, got up in the morning and went skiing again. Pretty darn motivational if you think about it. I wanted that stuff to continue. So I worked my butt off, could never have been more productive. And what I remember that was, it was a step function process. Every time I'd look, I'd take a real hard look at where we're at and realize, what I know in the past, what I thought I knew and was able to bring to this is not going to be enough to get us to the next level. So I'm not just going to punt. I'm not prepared to fail and go back to working for a big company. I'm loving what I'm doing. How am I going to do this? Think outside the box. We haven't talked about it very much, but networking is really key. And we have talked about tackling things, facing your fears. The second year of that company, moved down out of the mountains for the summertime, and I had to hire 2 people. And I'd never hired anybody before. I'd been through the process a couple of times as an interviewer, and I'd seen some really bad managers hiring people. I knew what not to do, or at least some of the things. But I had to hire my first 2 employees, and one of them was an extremely experienced, much older guy who just wowed me in the interview. And I was like, I want to work with this guy. I should probably be working for this guy, but hell, okay, if I can get him, I'll take him. And the other one was an entry-level guy who had no business being in the company. He was a tire buster for a company like Goodyear. Like, he was working in the back, literally taking tires off of cars and breaking the old tires off. They wouldn't even let him work with the new tires. He was like a demolition guy in a tire shop. And I put him to work because he was really smart. That was just the only job he could get out of high school. But I got the idea that he had a great attitude. He was going to work his ass off. He was going to run through walls to make it happen. And he was smart. And so we just kept step functioning it up. Just to wrap this up, if you're on this podcast and you're thinking about being a CEO, or if you're not sure how you think about being a CEO, until Gabe's book comes out, which I'm not sure exactly what the publication date is going to be.
It'll be a while.
Until that one comes out, you want to go read a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. So I had the pleasure to work for Ben when he was running Loud Cloud, where we basically invented cloud computing. And I was a VP of engineering there, so I was in his exec staff meetings and all hands. And all the events that he describes about Loud Cloud were happening while I was there. And yet none of that came across. Ben made being a CEO look easy. So it was a real shock to me 2 ways. When I read the book and found out, holy crap, really, we were that close to disaster? he totally hid that. And because he made it look easy, that encouraged me to try and be a CEO, because I thought, Jesus, how hard can it be? This looks easy. Turns out it's a hard job. It's kind of lonely, and there's a lot of challenges to it, and the other guys can talk about it more. But that's my story.
Wow. Wow. All right. Gabe, anything to add?
Can you remind me of the core question? I can't remember where we started.
Entrepreneurial.
Yeah. Basically,
Not a company.
Say what?
I thought you approached it in the prep stuff as if you're thinking about starting a company. If you have an entrepreneurial bent,
right? If you have the desire to run your own company, or to be your own boss, or to be in that kind of vein or mindset, what do you need to know? Like, what do you need to know, or what do you need to do that's sort of the important above all else? Like, just the things that you must understand, if that makes sense.
Okay. On the positive side, it's every bit as fun as you might imagine it to be. Like, when it works, it's freaking awesome. It's so awesome. Like, I mean, we have this big convention this week, 550 customers there, and they're all cheering, and you're giving the speeches. It's like, wow, I'm never going to be a rock star, but this is as close as I'm ever going to get. Right. And so, like, there are those moments where it's every bit as, dripping in syrup and goodness as you daydream that they might be. But I agree with what your dad said. There are times that I don't think people have any idea how hard it is. I mean, personal attacks, Glassdoor reviews. I try really hard to be very open on the way we take survey information from our employees. And so we do this thing twice a year called our patch surveys. So the values called the patch values, and you know that. But anyway, the patch surveys, I mean, I remember when I was younger. Now I can kind of handle it. Now I've been to enough genuine therapy, literally, on this issue to be able to handle my patch surveys. But like, there were times when I was younger and I'd get them and it would just devastate me. And I had this choice, like, do I keep subjecting myself to this? And I was like, yes, the right thing to do is managers are accountable to their employees. So we do this, we do this. But then, I was a kid. I was figuring my shit out. I didn't know what I was doing half the time. So yes, I made mistakes. And they'd show up in those patch surveys. And thank God they did, because I had to learn and get better. But, like, I'm not at all, there's no, like, don't hear me saying I'm the victim. I'm the beneficiary. I got great feedback that helped me be a better executive. At the same time, I'm just telling you, the sting on that kind of stuff, the sting of missing your paycheck because you need to pay your employees, or wondering if you're going to go out of business. When I'd been on the job 8 months at Kasasa, earlier Bankview, when our product was illegal. We had $1 million left in the bank. We had $1 million left in the bank and a $300,000 monthly burn. I mean, like, 45 employees. And I was super transparent. Unlike Horowitz, I was like, I told everybody, hey, guess what, guys? We got $1 million in the bank. We got a $300,000 burn. So, the thing that I'm afraid of is everybody's going to quit. But nobody did, because we had built such a good culture, and, we were friends, and I don't know, God bless us, we were super duper lucky. But that kind of pressure that comes with a job is really indescribable. It's a thing that, had I never experienced it, I wouldn't know how to act. When I talk to people that have experienced it, it's just like there's this knowing. And when I talk to people that have yet to experience it and they have their wide-eyed optimist of being what an entrepreneur is like, I just kind of feel a little bit sorry for them. It's gonna be way harder than you think. And one of the things I hate is, even some of my friends that I love will project entrepreneurship as if there's this paint by numbers approach to getting to where you need to go. Like, it is not that. It is a drunken drive up Pikes Peak, bouncing off the rails all the way up, just hoping you don't die before you get to the top.
Wait, they have rails now?
I don't know. Hypothetically, I don't know.
They have rails,
an imaginary scenario, David. I don't know.
I used to go up and watch the Pikes Peak hill climb when there was no rails, and they were going up at 100 miles an hour.
But it's hanging off with only 3 tires on the road.
Exactly.
The point is, it's not this linear progression. It sucks. And so, It's as awesome as you think it is, and it's way more terrible than you think it is, and you got to decide if you're really up for that. I agree with what Daniel said. Like, I'm not sure it's for everybody. I used to think everybody should try to just believe, like, just go for it, just, you know, hoorah, Herbie, the love bug it to death. But I'm not sure that's really how it works, because there are many times I wish I'd have just bought a funeral home.
I got to tell you, I think there's a lot to be said for working for a startup, especially when you're because you have so little to lose.
Yeah.
Before you're really invested in your career, you should work for one startup just so you have that contrast and you have that experience of doing whatever the hell needs to be done, where job descriptions don't exist. We skipped titles. We didn't have roles and responsibilities, any of that crap. We didn't have time for it. We had way too much work to be done.
You got to get a job done. That's the weirdest thing when politics starts coming in. It's like it starts off in this totally egalitarian. We all die together. We all win together. Do y'all want to get this done or not?
Yeah.
It turns into, well, my team did this. And it's like, well, who cares? Are we making money or not? Are we growing or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think everybody's card said director. Because we needed everybody to have enough title to talk to anybody. But even our admin was a director.
Oh, cool.
It didn't say what she was a director of.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter at all.
Stuff.
There you go.
I was going to say that was one of the funniest conversations when Eric and I and Andrew, who also works with us, that was one of the funniest conversations we had. It was our weekly meeting at Chili's. Yep. And there was the discussion about titles, and I'm like, I honestly don't care. Y'all can pick whatever title you need to talk to whoever you need to talk to. I could care less what it is. And Eric was the one that was pressuring me because I hate the idea of being a CEO and not feeling like one. So I don't like to. I hate when people just a little bit, because I feel like until I've earned it and created a company that's successful and in the black, I don't really think I deserve the title. And it just that's one of my pet peeves is titles. I don't care. Like you said,
Daniel, I wouldn't take the title of CEO at Dealer Skins until we had $1 million in revenue. And that took us a couple of years. And I was just like, CEO of what? CEO of like a few $100,000. That's like, there's families with more change than that. I'm not the CEO of anything.
Exactly.
Something less than $1 million in revenue. I'm just saying there is some wisdom to the humility of recognizing that you're trying to build something real.
Yeah. Although it is good that we didn't call you that we didn't finalize the name the Dawn in the business card. Anyway, so kind of coming to the end here and wrapping up. Can
I tell you more about the funeral home though, real quick? Seriously,
there's a lot of business there.
Honest. It is a recession-proof industry.
I'm really not. I'm in this club called YPO, which is Young Presidents Organization, and there are like 3 main types of people I've noticed in this club. There are the people that are the entrepreneurs like me that are doing these more techie startup things, and it's feast or famine. Some of us are doing great, others are struggling. Half of, wondering if we're getting a paycheck. There are the hired gunny kind of CEOs that come in to do these turnarounds. And then there are these other guys that run kind of really long-term, slow-growth businesses. And they're by far the happiest. Like, it's an order of magnitude. Everybody else, in my opinion, just wishes we had like a business that just worked every year. And so I've come up with 4 rules, 3 of which are requirements, 4 is bonus points that I'd like to share with your listeners for the business I would start if I was in my 20s.
Go for it.
First thing is there would be no technology. I want something completely technology proof. The pace of innovation is growing so fast to think that you're going to outsmart AI is ridiculous. So if technology is a critical success component of your business, I would say think of something else. The next one is don't have something dependent on the economy. I've lived through the dot-com implosion and the Great Recession, and they really sucked for my business. It was super duper bad. Firing people, like wondering if you're going to be in business the next day. And meanwhile, like there are other businesses like hair salons that aren't even struggling. So why not just do one of those businesses that don't struggle? And then the third component is no regulatory oversight. I have nothing against the government necessarily. I'm just saying being in the business where the government has nearly shut me down 4 times due to things like offering free checking accounts they don't understand, or new loans that'll help people get out of debt more quickly because they don't understand them and they think they should, oppose these great ideas. I just don't want to be in a business where my creativity is stifled by government approval. And then the fourth component is, if all the cool kids from Harvard think it's beneath them, do that. So, because you don't want to compete with those assholes.
Touchdown, guys.
Yeah. So think about like 20-year horizon, 5% growth per year, no technology impediments, no recession impediments, no regulatory impediments, and you're doing the thing that all the other smart kids think is beneath them. Meanwhile, you bank. That's what I would do.
Thank you for the validation. That's all I say.
Okay. Well, do you mind if we do one more kind of final roundup?
I felt passionately about my funeral home justification for why that was business. If you go back through my 4 points, funeral home sale. Strip clubs do too, but I'm more opposed.
There you go.
Legitimately, I did have a conversation with someone 2.5 years ago specifically about that.
It's a good business, but you just can't do it. You wouldn't even tell your mom. Come on. You don't.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
My mom, she'd understand.
Oh, mama.
That makes sense. Okay. So one final roundup before we do close out. If you could look back at a pivotal moment in your life, what would be the one piece of advice you today would want to give to yourself then? So it doesn't have to be a specific time in your life of like age in terms of years, but like a pivotal moment where if you had made a different decision, you think things might have turned out differently. What advice would you have given yourself back then?
Related to business, right? We're just doing business.
I mean, it can be, but
I think for me that should be a constraint.
Okay, we'll keep it to business thing here.
All right.
Anybody want to lead it off?
All right, I'm gonna make sure that these guys get a last word in. I feel like I've been a little weird on that. For me, so this is it ties back into business, I promise, but it's a bit of a personal thing. Like younger guys hormonally tend to focus on going out, hanging out with girls and all that stuff. And this is strictly speaking to the guys. I'm sure there are a few girls out there that are, the same way. But for me, I got distracted a lot by the opposite sex. And I feel like if I'd had a conversation with myself now when I was 18, 19, it would have been to take the professional opportunities that I had at UT and actually really, really kind of buckle down and utilize those rather than focusing on hanging out with girls, going to parties, things like that. That was all a good experience, but I feel like I definitely could have gotten more out of my experience had I been able to utilize, delayed gratification, so to speak. Because right now, I have the ability to go out every single night and be able to pay bills and everything else. And I have the time, but I really wish that I utilized my time better in school because, I could get more out of what I'm doing right now if I had that experience in school.
Right. There you go. Dad, do you want to take a swing at it?
Sure. I got two bits, and they're both, I think, kind of short. First one is network more. Kind of echoing part of Daniel's piece, but it is never going to be easier to add limbs and branches to your tree of connections than right out of high school and college because you're meeting so many people. You find a supplier of cheap or free business cards, have a LinkedIn profile, keep it on the up and up. Don't put anything stupid on there that you're not going to want to show an employer 10 years from now because it won't go away. This is the internet. So plan ahead a little bit, be smart, but start to build your brand. What are you interested in? What are you on about? Meet those people, get them in your network. You're not going to lose them. You're going to be appreciative of it later on.
Yeah.
And the second one is completely different thread. because it's not, I realize when you asked about advice, I'd give myself, there's nothing I could say that would probably change my mind, because I don't know that it would be better. I like to think that I made those decisions because I did the best I could with what I had at the time. And I got to be happy with that. But you and I have recently had a conversation that I think bears on this. And that is that crashing and burning sucks.
Yeah.
Whether it's at work or in your personal life or anything else. If you get fired, if you're tossed out of a relationship or it dies for whatever reason, and you're heartbroken, or your gut is in your wherever, if your heart is in the toilet, kind of looking for a safe word there. If when you look around and you're just depressed, when things suck, my heartfelt decades of experience would be, it always seems to be darkest before the dawn. Every single time that I've been fired, it's led me to a better situation. And there was no way to ever predict that. It's led me to jobs, or to moving, or in the case of relationships, to better relationships that I would not have been open to. I wasn't looking for them. There was no way for it to attach, no way for it to happen, until I had to rock out. You get canned from a job, suck it up. Your new job is find a job and lean on that network and do all the other practice stuff that we've talked about for the last an hour and a half, and get out there and put your shoulders back and your chin up and be a badass lobster out there.
I like that.
Have confidence in you. This is just one bump in the road, and you have a long road behind you already and an even longer road ahead of you. So put a smile on your face and enjoy it. Yeah, what's happened has happened. Yeah. You're not going to go back and undo it. So that's my sort of hopeful sounding advice for when shit goes in the fan.
There you go. Damn.
Awesome answer. I think my first advice to myself would be not to go into zoology for pre-med, because I have short plans. It was a super duper waste of time. My brother studied Rockstar at Berkeley in Boston. Like, it's an actual degree. It's not called Rockstar. It's called like performance art, but basically they teach you to be a rock star. And if I could do anything, I would try to get that degree, because it'd be equally useless as my zoology degree, but I would actually be able to play
more fun.
He'd have more fun getting it.
It'd be way more fun, totally. And he's doing great with it. I think the advice I would give is I know this is so cheesy what I'm about to say. That's why I tried to lead off with a silly joke. Because I was embarrassed for what I'm about to say, but I would try to believe in myself more. I was so insecure when I started. I think everybody's insecure when they start, but also trying to start off as a CEO when you're just getting going, you don't even know what you're doing. That was pretty weird. And I just felt completely in over my head the entire time. And I wish I'd had more belief that I was worthy of the job. Like it's only, I'm 40 now. I started at 22, so 18 years in this kind of job. And I can say that it's probably only in the last 2 that I started to feel like I deserve it. And I think, maybe that's some consolation to anybody else that's out there. I don't know. Like, I can say to myself, like, what I wish I had known is that I deserved it. Maybe I didn't. And maybe you don't feel like you do. And maybe that's like the most important thing to realize. If you're doing this job and you don't feel like you deserve it, maybe you're doing it just right.
Huh. Man.
All right, Eric, bring us home.
So, would you want me to give my advice to myself if I was?
Yeah, why not?
Honestly, the biggest piece of advice that I could give myself, and I remember it's exactly when I was 19 years old and I was looking at quitting swimming. Like, for good. I was just done. I was tired of it. I was frustrated. I thought I had hit my peak, and I was just angry. And the reason I thought I had hit my peak was because I was watching everybody else that had come behind me that was younger than I was just blow past me. Like, I was seeing kids that were in the group was called Tiger Sharks, who were 10, 11, 12, 13 when I had first seen them. And then now, 4 years later, they're just demolishing my times. They're completely just effortlessly walking by everything that I thought I was like, I'm a badass at that. And the one piece of advice I wish I'd been able to give myself then was stop forming your success off of how everybody else is doing, because the way that you're approaching it is you're looking at everybody else and expecting your rate of progress to be the exact same or even anywhere similar. And it was such a frustrating thing back then that I just didn't understand it. I couldn't understand. Like, I'm coming to practice every single day. I'm working my butt off. I'm eating everything right. And I just could never make it work. And I still just kept trying to look at everybody else around me. And it was only until like 4 or 5 months ago that I finally figured it out. I need to actually focus on everything that I can do in front of me. And that's it. I can't look at how somebody else is approaching their life and hoping that I'll be able to do it the same way. And that was some of those kind of hard to realize, because I had always sort of based how I felt about what I was doing off of the people around me. And so it was more important for me to focus on things about the things that I could accomplish with what was in front of me at the time, instead of focusing on how everybody else approached their lives.
Well said.
Cool story.
Yeah. Anyway, gentlemen, it is 6:31. This is probably the first time I've ever been able to end a podcast on time, because most of the time we end up rambling and getting stuck off into tangents. And I'm extraordinarily happy to say this was probably, albeit one of the shortest podcasts I've ever done, this was probably one of the ones I've enjoyed the most.
Thank you for having us.
No, it's been seriously enlightening, and I hope that anybody that watches this and either watches the pre-recording or watches the recording back, or gets a chance to, I'm going to edit down some pieces that I think are particularly notable, and I'm going to start kind of putting them out on Twitter and YouTube and making sure that those get out there. But there's some seriously important things that I think a lot of people need to hear, and I hope that this gets out to them. So, but thank you guys so much for giving your thoughts and for being here. This has been incredible.
My pleasure. I was glad to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for setting up. Thanks, Daniel and Gabe, for sharing your experiences. It was really helpful. I appreciate it.
Enjoyed it as well. Love to go.
It was a pleasure meeting you guys. Well, meeting you, Gabe, seeing you guys.
There you go.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Hey, Gabe, real quick. Oh. I'll email him later.
Boom.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
my God.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast. Thank you guys so much.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.